Welcome back to Boston has entered the chat. George Balekji, Kasey, Hudson. Case, we're seeing the hiring cycle and the NHL head coaches heat up.
Musical
Rick Tocchet, now with the Philadelphia Flyers, was formerly with the Canucks. Another guy potentially could have been a Bees' next head coach off the board.
I know, and not that I'm surprised. We got a chance to catch up with Pete Blackburn and get an opinion on it, but look, Boston, I love you. I wasn't rooting for Tocchet coming here. Big fan of Tocchet too, but him having that home return, it feels like a good fit. That's going to be a nice storyline for next year. But it keeps some really good candidates still on the market. It's just timeline now.
Sturm, Misha Donskov. We'll get into that conversation. Let's bring her in. Sophia Jurksztowicz, you guys know her, of course, covering the Bruins ringside pre-post game. Also catch her on the Hockey Hub and respect her game. Sophia, good morning. What's up?
Well, first of all, guys, when I was asked to be on the show, thanks for having me on, I was talking to several producers, and they're like, will you come in person or will you do it from home? And I was like, whatever, I'll come in person. It's a fun drive. This morning I woke up and I was like, LOL, JK, definitely doing it from home. Definitely not coming in person.
Probably 2 hour traffic.
And the rain.
In the rain, I'm like, yeah, I'm staying home. But thanks for having me on bright and early, and happy to talk Bruins any time of the day. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
Especially best in the morning. And I respect you making that smart move. If you can avoid traffic in Boston, that's the name of my game. That's how I play my whole day. I'll do it. So let's figure out the traffic we see of who could be the Bruins' next head coach. Now someone's starting to heat up. Marc Sturm, formerly was a player with the Bees, has spent the last few seasons as an assistant head coach with the LA Kings. What do you make of that? We see a new name come up, especially someone that's a former player, which to me is significant, Sophia, because you're familiar with Boston, you're familiar with the culture, and you know what that spoked B stands for.
You know what? That is actually a really good point, because yesterday, Kasey and I on the Hockey Hub were talking about this, and I didn't think any Bruins ties mattered at all to the coaching decision. In fact, I was like, I feel like the Boston Bruins aren't very, and some teams are like this, and I point to the Toronto Maple Leafs only because I have like history covering them, but some teams are a little, and I'm struggling for the word, but I don't want to say showy, or like they push the marketing angle. It's not exact. I'm not saying it exactly right, but I hope you kind of get my vibe. I feel like the Bruins aren't like that. They kind of stray away from maybe making like a splash in the headlines, although they do that. They did that at the trade deadline, but it's not for any sort of marketing reason, if that makes any sense. So I don't feel like that mattered to the Boston Bruins. But your point is perfect with talking about the culture and what it means to wear the spoked B, because that is one of the biggest gaps right now and one of the biggest storylines with the Boston Bruins. Not saying it's gone, not saying David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy did a bad job. It's just changed really fast and really quickly, and it's kind of like, the quicksand effect, or holding that stick too tight, and they're trying to hold on. So we talked about a coaching candidate yesterday with Pete Blackburn and what would be a right fit, and one of my biggest takeaways is management needs to talk to the future leadership group and vice versa, and they need to decide how involved is this coach going to be in terms of being a room guy, being one of the leaders on the team, or is he going to kind of step back, which Bruce Cassidy and Monty did over the last couple of seasons, and they were very vocal about that. Obviously, if they needed to step in, it's not like Patrice Bergeron or Chara were like, no, we're the leaders here. They just didn't need to. And they had that kind of hands-off approach about managing the room. So that is a really important point, because they understand the culture, the guys who have been in the Bruins organization. I don't think that's going to be the X factor. I do think that obviously Don Sweeney's taking time in these interviews. Originally, when the end of season press conference went down, I didn't anticipate it being like, okay, in a week we're going to know. I feel like he's really, going deep and trying to figure out what to do. But also some of the guys, he did say this so I think when the draft lottery, he had a media availability. He did say some of the guys that he's considering are currently working right now in the postseason. So you've got to factor that in as well about where the choices are. With your point, George, and I'll wrap up because I'm rambling over here, but with your point, I do like that angle. I just don't think it's the most important one.
I think, so what I loved about yesterday's conversation with Pete is that the timeline topic came up. And from what you just described, this is such a layered hire process. I'm going to get that correct. at some point.
I was like, did you say glaring or layering?
Whatever. There's layers to this hiring process this time. Thank you, y'all. And then the fact that you might have a younger locker room, and Pete said there's still some veterans in there. It's not super young, but the weight of the shoulders of like younger guys came in towards the end of the season. So bottom line, you could have a little bit younger of a locker room. Leadership has to be reestablished, and then it's like supporting the culture that is the Boston Bruins. Does this kind of, as you mentioned beforehand in the previous interview and now, what does this say about the timeline? Like, should we be getting a coach sooner rather than later? Because sometimes it takes a minute to start letting everyone know, like, this is going to be the culture. These are going to be some changes moving forward, and the offseason's the prime time to do that.
Yeah, and to his point, like if you're trying to attract free agents and make some signings over the season, they want to know who they're playing for, and like that's a that's like the most important point as a player. Especially we have the list of free agents, the ones that have been established. They're not like, oh, I just want any opportunity. They're grateful to be in the NHL, but they've got choices. So they want to know who they're playing for and kind of what's going on. But I think mid-June, I looked it up, I don't know, for a podcast a week ago, and I forget the date, but when Jim Montgomery was hired, I think it was like June 25th or 6th or something like that. I think it was end of June. But as long as it's before July 1st, I think they're good. And like I said, Don Sweeney was clear that he's interested in people or talking to people who are currently working jobs right now. And so in the postseason. So that is a factor as well. I think as the playoffs continue and teams drop off, you're just going to have, the more freedom to be able to have these interviews and to make the decisions and to officially sign contracts and stuff like that. So I anticipate it happening in the next month for sure. It's happening before July 1st. Like, mark my words. If I'm wrong, then that's crazy. But it's going to happen before July 1st.
Sophia, your personal research department, George Balekji, just looked it up. Bruce Cassidy was named the head coach for the Bees May 24th, 2016. Jim Montgomery, June 30th. So you're spot on. That is that cutoff, and it makes sense because the Bruins have the cap space. The cap is going up. They're in a retool, rebuild. I'm just going to call it whatever I want. It's a revamp, restoration, refurbishing. They have a lot to do, and it also starts with they got younger at the trade deadline. They got better prospects. They revamped their entire farm system. They got more draft picks. You still need the leaders. And one more, when I look at Marco Sturm, and we talked about it, I think that was so impressive. When you have a Patrice Bergeron, the room can police itself. But it's younger now. Marco Sturm, though, is that guy that played with a Patrice Bergeron for multiple seasons. Was the second, third leading scorer on this team with a Patrice Bergeron-led Bruins team. So there is that connection of he understands leadership, he understands culture, and that's what I think is important. So if there are the Sturm rumors, that's them, Don Sweeney, Kim Neely looking at, okay, who are the Bruin links we have? If there are the Misha Donskov rumors, that is going away from anyone affiliated with the Bruins. But I think what's most important, what it says about the coaching search is they're not leaving any stone unturned. They're looking at every possibility. They're not locked in on guys that are connected to the Bruins. They're not locked in on guys that have nothing to do with the Bruins. It's literally going out and looking at every candidate they possibly can. And between Sturm, who's been with the Kings, Misha Donskov, I want to talk about that. He's a guy that's been with the Stars, is connected with Team Canada, who Don Sweeney was a GM for. But that's a guy that came up through hockey ops, through analytics, has learned from Bruce Cassidy, won the Cup with the Knights, has been with the Stars the last 2 seasons, a lot of postseason experience. Again, that's what's important, and I like that there's every single option on the table for who can lead the Bruins next.
Yeah, I love all the points you make, and the more, after we get off the show, I'm going to think about this Bruins tie, because like the more you talk about that, the experience of playing with the Bergeron, the more I'm like, okay, wait a minute, this actually is a bigger factor than I was like. I just brushed it off. Like, I didn't even really think, like, yeah, who cares? He was in the Bees organization, doesn't matter. But those points are really, really strong. I love, obviously, after the big names like Tocchet and, oh my God, guys, Sullivan, yes, we're gone. I've been looking more into just these, no, I wouldn't say smaller names, but candidates that don't have a ton of NHL head coaching experience or whatever, a ton of experience in the NHL. And I love the Donskov angle. Yes, that one seems to be kind of like standing out to me. And you mentioned obviously Team Canada, Don Sweeney, relationships there. We know that a relationship with your GM is also very important. And I think to your point about leaving no stone unturned and really like thorough research, Sweens has hired 2 excellent coaches in the last couple of years, and they're both not with the organization anymore. So he is taking this, and that's, whatever. We're not talking about the past here. I feel like he's able to kind of, like Jim Montgomery to me was like a very surprise hire. He was not on my radar, especially that year he was hired. There were so many proven NHL candidates, so many big names that I was sure the Bruins were going to land one of them. And then I was like, whoa, Jim Montgomery, especially given his history, XYZ. Don Sweeney knows what he's doing, and he does research very thoroughly, takes this very thoroughly. For whatever reasons, it didn't work out. But the point is, I think the fact that he's made a couple of those hires and they've moved on, I'm hoping, and I think he's hoping, this is going to be a long-term hire. So that being said, you're not going with a hot name. You're not going with like a shiny name. He's doing his research, making sure the relationship is good, making sure the experience of X's and O's and being able to work with younger players, with guys that, according to retired players who are 50 years old now, there's a little bit more hand-holding, so to speak, or more communication needed with these younger guys. So those are all factors, like you said, relationships, experience, culture, what they can be, X's and O's. It's different than it used to be, which was just a hard-ass coach that knew the game of hockey and had NHL experience. That's changed, and we've seen a lot of guys in the NHL in management and on the ice in terms of coaching that didn't play at all, that didn't have a lot of experience, but it's like you said, the analytics, the stats, like they've worked their way through the system, and that leaves more candidates open. And I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but to all the points you're making, I love it, and I think Donskov's like right up there in terms of candidates.
I think it's a perfect tee-up, though, because for a second, it felt like George really sold Sturm, and then yes. I got excited about Donskov. So, like, they both weigh in heavily to the fact that they can speak to a young group and that they can help with the development. It's just, it's having that guy that comes in and can continue to help develop players, because we're seeing so many NHL teams just kind of flop because you do these call-ups, they're not ready, they can't jump into play right away, you give them 3 games and then you send them back down. But do you think that there's a leader in this locker room that can help support, whether it's a Donskov or a Sturm, somebody who's just going to jump up to the plate right away and kind of support the next head coach of the Bruins?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I hate like cliche, I hate saying things just because other people are saying them, but sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. But it really is going to be up to Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak. Are they? I always think like, oh God, if the guys watch this, I want to do justice by them. Are they ready? I don't know, because I think the rug was taken from under them in the trade deadline. Are they getting ready and doing everything they possibly can? Yes. Like, I know that. I feel that. I have seen with David Pastrnak, who we all know, guys, he's in the Dunkin' commercials. Like, he's goofy. He had, his 2 front teeth chipped for a while and then, like, didn't feel like fixing. Like, he's just like a goofy, I wouldn't say aloof, right?
Carefree.
Carefree. That's a way better word. Guy, I've seen him grow up so fast, like 5 years in the last year, and life experience will do that to you. He has had a very tough ride on a personal level. Yeah. And now he's a dad, and now he's, several years older. Still a young guy though, but he has grown up, his maturity, and one of the biggest factors, or one of the biggest clues I have to that is how he interacts with the media, was always really great. But it was Marchand and it was Bergeron and it was Chara and even Nick Foligno when he was here, who were coming out no matter what. Like, tough loss, great win. They talk to the media every practice and every game, and that is annoying and that is a tough job. But the way Patrice's demeanor was and the way Marchand's demeanor was, they got it. They're like, this is my job. I represent this team. I want to make sure the media is getting answers from me because I want to represent this team and protect this team. Pastrnak was great at that, but he sometimes had this like impatience, kind of like, okay, are we done? Like, let me get out of the scrum. It's 20 minutes long. Understood. I'm not knocking him. Understood. Now he, without being asked, comes out every single time, especially at the end of the season, which was so hard and so bad and so tough to answer questions. And he would sit there. I remember Bergie would put his hand on the locker and his foot up on the stall, like this relaxed pose of being like, if it takes 30 minutes to answer these questions, I'm doing it. And Pasta would kind of be like, are we done? And now he has that demeanor, and he's like, I'm protecting this team. This is my team. And he took that ownership, and like, honestly, over the course of 6 months to even shorter, after the trade deadline, it skyrocketed. So to answer your question, are they fully ready? We don't know, but him and McAvoy are getting ready to make sure that they bring in these young guys and take care of them and protect this team the way the guys before them did.
Sophia, I think that's a great point. There's not just the pressure that comes with wearing the C. There's the responsibilities that come with that as well. And that's awesome, that insight, because I didn't know that about Pasta, that shift, but that shows that he is someone that's ready to take on that next step as a Bruins leader. They need it in the dressing room. They need it in the head coaching office. They need it all over. They're not far away from getting back to being in the playoffs and being contenders, but leadership does matter. She's Sophia Jurksztowicz. Soph, appreciate you waking up with us, and thank you for making the smart move and not dealing with traffic this morning.